poem will not end apartheid. My words, no matter how beautiful, clever, or carefully strung together, will not end the occupation, allow the refugees to return, or create equality within Israeli society. The status quo is a fantasy, telling us it's okay to sit on our hands, called political art propaganda, rather than those who politicize our lives, propagandists. Every American and Brit should ask themselves this question: why are bombs and white phosphorus getting dropped on open-air prisons with money that should be going to pay for your medical expenses? And dear academics and leftists, I appreciate your books on Israeli massacres, but you refuse to take the bullets out of IDF guns with your stances. The problem is not just the occupation or putting a better face on Zionism, because 750,000 Palestinians were displaced before those settlements were constructed, half of them before Israel was created. We don't need another book explaining the situation. We need a lesson plan to stop the next bomb from dropping. Silence is complicity. Over-intellectualization tells us to theorize on the power of art. While farmers are kicked off land, children are stolen on the way to school, people are caged and beaten and split from loved ones, bombed and broken in open-air prisons, bought and paid for with our tax dollars. We're part of the problem. That is not theoretical. I don't want to hug a segregationist, wave to you at a separate water fountain, or appeal to you from the back of the bus. A day will come, I swear to you all, when Zionists cower and embarrassment, deny involvement like those who profited off of Stephen Biko's lifeless body and Bobby Sands' empty stomach. So yes, I'm going to boycott all Israeli products and go to the root of the conflict, because settlements are just the branches of a Zionist program. Every 729 cultural institution and dialogue farce, from Sabra to Ahava, Max Brenner to Aroma, Veolia and Motorola, signing a 2-year contract stacks up little to 63 years of continued ethnic cleansing. Finally, to all you artists building bridges between apartheid and normalization, you serve an agenda which rebrands colonialism as enlightened liberalism, concerts, ballets, and raves in Israel's Sun City. A haven and party stop for pink washers who callously ignore Palestinian LGBT groups fighting against all systems of oppression. Palestinian civil society has spoken. Don't cross this picket line or cash in that paycheck signed apartheid. Put down stolen beauty, cancel that gig, and join the rest of us on the right side of history.
If you are, clap if you are, throw up some fingers if you are. Are you guys excited for performance poetry? Yes, you can, my workshop. We are going to get started in a few minutes, so if you need to tell a friend, call a friend, bring a friend, go out and say that we have, I don't know, we have food in here, and coffee, and all that other fun stuff. Okay, we'll be back. Okay, whoa, hey, how are you? We got a job. My job is to make everybody happy. Hi, front row people. Really nice to meet you. I apologize for the accent. I'm from America. The first thing I figured would be really important to tell people, my job is to, through my loud voice, to quiet everybody down. So we're going to do that. I grew up in a small town in western Massachusetts. Now, Massachusetts is a little bit weird. Like, you guys, this is a lefty festival. You guys are the fallen empire. We are the current empire. So we decided to name our towns like Oxford and Cambridge. I'm from East Hampton. We have a Leicester. We have a Leeds. We have all these towns and cities. And I grew up in a town called East Hampton. There were 9,000 people there. Of those 9,000 people, 8,990 of them were white. And then there was my family. I'm Palestinian. So growing up as a fat brown kid with one eyebrow, going to Catholic school in western Massachusetts, was a little bit awkward. So when I first started writing poetry and getting into lefty politics, I would talk a lot about identity, like what it was like on the playground and how it was being a Palestinian whose grandparents were refugees from 1948. So the first poem I'm going to do is called Palestinian Identity. And this basically, it goes out to all the kids that I grew up with who tortured me. I was a large child. They drew my weight on my driveway one time. It's not very nice. So they get this poem in response. Just to let you guys know a little about where I'm from. You guys know the BBC, right? In the United States, we consider the BBC leftist socialist propaganda. So that's basically to give you a media landscape of what it looks like in the United States. So we're going to start happy, and then we're going to go into pieces that are called passionate. Some people call them angry. I don't know if that's because of my eyebrows. Can I walk in front of this?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. I was born overseas, a refugee, with little knowledge of myself or my ancestry. Growing up in American society, you conform to the mentality. I watched MTV, envied actors and people who drove Mercedes. I didn't listen to Noam Chomsky or listen to Public Enemy. I was just a dark kid trying to be a white kid, acting like a black kid in my middle-class economy. But my mom, she didn't speak this language perfectly, and I was reminded with certainty. My name wasn't Ali or Punjabi MC, not Khalid Rashid or anyone from Aladdin's family. I was just me. But who was me, I asked the question quietly. As my relatives suffered unjustly, fighting oppression in Mideast countries, what is Palestinian identity? What was preventing me from seeing what others pointed out so easily? It's scary not having autonomy, the only one with a permanent tan on the baseball team, but it's funny being seen, I know, I look like that terrorist in that movie. Yeah, the biggest nose in 3 counties. But I think I figured it out eventually. I'm a Palestinian American, standing proudly with one foot on democracy and the other seeking autonomy, while the media tries to rewrite my people's history. I'll always be me, with my roots planted firmly, American with Palestinian ancestry, planting seeds for hybrid ideology in lands of productivity. You see, these schemes aren't just a dream. It's what I say, know, and mean. And one day the truth will be seen, with transparency. So I step forward, a part of the team. The true essence of what I believe to be Palestinian American identity. You gotta start off a little light because the lighting is pretty bad up here, so you know, this doesn't come easy. When the brows furrow, they turn into one again, and it's like caterpillars jolting across my face. I was in a couple comedy festivals. I think I'm not. Does anybody here, raise your hand if you know about Palestine? Sweet. What? You're radicals. I'm going to report all of you. Tony Blair's on book tour talking about how he killed 1 million people and he's really awesome. Screw that guy. The next poem I'm going to do a poem called Revolution. Now, people have been following the populations rising up throughout the Middle East, Tunisia, Egypt, Syria. Yes? Okay. If not, you don't have a TV and you hate newspapers. This poem's called Revolution. My family, when they moved to the country 36 years ago, you know, my mom was active in the 60s, and there was this kind of feeling like, you know, we rebelled, we went to the conferences, we tried leftist revolution, just forget about it. You know, it didn't work out. Keep your head down, move forward, go be a doctor, go be an engineer. It's not worth it. So for my parents and for a lot of people, to see what happened in Tunisia and Egypt was this kind of wake-up call that things were possible, that change was possible, that enough people come together. Semi-oppression is not okay. You know, if you look at Syria, if you look at Bahrain, if you look at all throughout the Middle East, you can compare and contrast and say, well, this guy's worse than that guy. And so what it really came down to was no form of oppression was okay. Whether it's police brutality in our own community, fighting against oppression on the U.S.-Mexico border in America, whether it's cuts, whether it's trying to get a job in your own society, people need to rise up and stand up for their rights, or your government or those oppressors will systematically strip it away from you. So, can we turn it up just a little bit? Will that hurt anybody's ears? Mic check. Oh, we got a little bit louder. I'm going to quiet you down to that. I hope you're enjoying your baguette or your crumpet. I don't know what you guys eat here. I'm not judging. You gave us your repeater raise. Yeah, this is better, right? This is okay? Am I hurting your ears? Mic check. So this is called Revolution. You were told, no. Stop complaining, keep your head down, walk forward, smile when spoken to. This is just how things are. It could be worse, it could be over there, it could be back the way it was, but it can't be what you're thinking. They're too powerful, too brutal, too supported by the West, Saudi, Israel, broker deals that keep you down and your resources out cheap. Don't stand up, resist, reject, must respect status quo that keep you imprisoned, your outspoken tortured, your economy, pillaged. In the U.S., moderates, reinforced propaganda, working within a system that revolution from Tahrir to Occupy Wall Street. People are redefining authority by asserting communities as leaders. We are the future. And that is not a campaign slogan, but a lifestyle that sees snapping fists as a catalyst to resistance, shaking off rulers, corrupt Arab neighbors, leagues of dictators, U.S. imperialism, Israeli hegemony, and old guard dog egos who are bruised by their failures. Revolution doesn't come easy. The world is watching. Much of the world is working against you. Remember that. But you are a people's movement. Your resolve is a revolution. Much of the world is standing with you. Remember that. I feel like being on it. I gotta stand on this damn chair for this poem. I feel so far away from you happy people in the back. Hi, I like pool too. I'm not so good on the smaller tables. And I feel like you can't see me over there. I don't know, we got like an hour, so I'm gonna do a bunch of stuff, but I'm gonna tell you a little bit about stuff. So, I'm a big fan of human rights. Do you like human rights? I hope so, you came to the workshop earlier. Now, there's this thing. When it comes to Israel, Palestine, inside of the U.S., mostly our media. And it's like, if the Palestinian people only come to the table, give up 90% of their homeland, negotiate for the next 100 years, give up the right of return, and stay in Bantustan's and ghettos, then maybe Israel will give them a sliver of historic Palestine. I'm not really a fan of that, so I wrote this poem, Coexistence, in response. And there's a lot of movie and Hollywood references because they like to use culture and art to whitewash crimes. I don't want to coexist. Not like good guys and bad guys and true lies and propaganda. Put on black faces, cow drivers, or deli owners in your racist comedies. Not bomb your Dunkin' Donuts with my kafia, fist pound Fox News, or let you steal my food and call it Israeli salad. I won't mess with the Zohan, or let them turn the rocks of Palestinian children into balloon animals. While Israeli soldiers snipe our children's head, shoulders, knees, and stomachs, Hollywood snipes years of young ones, belovable tales of blue and white heroes. I'm not looking for your approval, not a token roll or jump on my knees scrubbing toilets in Israel's Congress. I'd rather fight with blacks and Latinos against oppression than concede to a mainstream plantation. It sees me as other, unless I'm checking a college application. I don't believe in the tooth fairy, or 2,000 claims of homes you supposedly served when people resurrected and walked on water all exist. And a world that fights against racism like Martin and Malcolm. Please ghetto tales of Stephen Biko as a song that never dies, no matter what apartheid makes of our bodies, feeds mouths in Belfast streets. And resurrects Bobby Sands' message, so that we'll never be hungry again. And whether you know it or not, I'm the best solution you have. One man asking for one vote, telling you to look at the sea, and I'll never drag you into it. I will never return the favor. I'm not stretching an olive branch and a rifle. I'm extending reality. Because being surrounded by so-called enemies on your borders is easier than in your towns and election centers. We may not be brothers, but this neighborhood has made us cousins. I don't want to coexist. I want to exist as a human being, and justice will take care of the rest. Hello. You're a side row, you're not even front row. Are you having a good time? Hey, you having a good time? 1 through 10, what would you give it? A 12? That's so weird of you. Very nice people. I love you, Britain. This next poem is called Tony Blair, You're an Asshole. Tony Blair, you're an asshole. That's it, I just want to say that. I was also going to do a poem called Dear Britain, Thank You for the Balfour Declaration. No? Everybody get that? Okay. Or the British Mandate. Or, I don't know. Yeah, what? You got it. You raised your hand. Yeah, 17. Nice, and then the other British, yeah. We like you already. I'm going to do one more poem, then I'm going to talk a little bit about the book, then I'm going to do some other poems, then I'm going to, at the end, we can all hug and handshake and buy books. And my mom says that the book is the coolest thing to come out since corduroys. I'm a fan of corduroys, so I agree with her. And then if you get a signed copy, it actually triples the value. I don't really know what that's about, but we'll talk more about that. We have happy people who are selling it over there. The next poem we're going to do is called Iraq. No, forget it. We're going to switch it up. This is called the do's and don'ts of Palestine. Now, there's a lot of media bias in the U.S. There are certain things you can and can't say because you don't want to be too brown. You don't want to be too angry. It is after 9/11. It's only been 10 years. You don't want to scare the people. You have enormous eyebrows. So write this poem instead. So this poem is called The Do's and Don'ts of Palestine. And it tackles a lot of the double standards inside of the United States when we're talking about Palestine. There's like a loud troop in the back. I'm going to use this mic to say hi. Don't call it genocide. We don't want to offend anyone. If we offend them, they'll never listen to us. We have to be reasonable. 1,400, just a number. No names, no death. We want peace, negotiations. Don't mention Zionism. If you mention Zionism, they're going to call you anti-Semitic, and people will believe them. Don't cite Palestinian sources. No one would believe you. I wouldn't believe you. Trust Israeli sources. Don't ever be angry. If you're angry, they're going to call you angry. If you're angry, everyone's going to call you understandably emotional. We have to be pragmatic. Pragmatism is not a euphemism for concessions, although it may feel that way. Don't mention Allah or martyrs. It reminds them of Al-Qaeda, 9/11. It's not your job to fix their ignorance. Don't talk about refugees, boycott, or the one-state solution. If we want to win, we got to compromise. The road to peace is just ahead. Don't. Whatever you do, don't make analogies that include the Holocaust, Nazis, or the Warsaw Ghetto. Only Israelis are allowed to do this. We're discussing wars on Palestine, Lebanon, Syria, and Iran. Don't mention Haifa, Jaffa, Safed, or where your family's from. But if you do, not when random people say they love Israel. It doesn't matter where you came from, you can't actually go back. Don't, just don't, and that will lead to doing. There's this like weird, awkward feeling in our society, like if we become more liberal, meaning if we give up more of our rights, then somehow that's going to make racists less racist. It doesn't really work out that way. You should probably stand for your rights, whether it's women's rights, whether it's gay rights, whether it's a population that is under occupation or apartheid. It's up to us. Now, I live in the United States, which gives $3.1 billion a year in military aid to Israel. Apache helicopters and Hellfire missiles and cluster bombs and white phosphorus. You guys have preferential trade agreements. You have corporate complicity. You have societal complicity. So it is up to us who are living in the societies who are complicit in these systems of oppression to stand up against those. In the same way that you're standing up for healthcare, in the same way that you wouldn't cross a picket line on November 30th, in the same way that if you want to fight against cuts, you got to take to the streets, you got to organize, if you look at the labor movement and trade unionists and the way that people are waking up, that's what we need. I've had the pleasure of performing and speaking at a lot of the Occupy encampments in the U.S., and I always stay critical of any movement. But there are some good things happening. There are people making the connection that the war on Afghanistan and providing drone bombs across the world and killing innocent men, women, and children has a lot to do with our cuts. Because when they start stripping away rights from other people, and when they dry that well of support and of financial gain, they start attacking their own population. And it's something that has affected a lot of different sectors of Britain for decades, and a lot of people haven't noticed. Stop and search has everything to do with even people who aren't being stopped and searched. That kind of racism will destroy your society. So, this is called Iraq. And I was having a conversation with a guy, and it started off really well. He was Arab, I was Arab. I was like, okay, 1 for 1. So he was like, we need to pull out of Iraq. And I was like, yeah, we do. And he was like, because it costs us too much money. And I said, no, we need to pull out of Iraq because there's 1 million dead people, 5.5 million refugees, and dropping depleted uranium on civilian populations doesn't create liberation, it creates cancer. So, there's this like weird liberal argument, like, we need to pull out of places for our own interests. And I'm like, really? Like 9/11 shouldn't have happened because it was not good. And I was living on New York City, you know what I mean? Like, imagine if I said like, those planes cost too much money. That is the craziest argument I have ever heard in my life. You shouldn't strip away other people's lives because you shouldn't strip away other people's lives. So this called Iraq, and it goes out to a lot of liberal people in the U.S. I'm coming. Oh, I got so much energy. I haven't slept in 3 weeks. Iraq has a $79 billion surplus. Yeah, that was loud and back. You looked up from your book. Go this close, you might get time. Iraq has a $79 billion surplus. We spent more than $1 trillion on this war. More than 4,000 of our troops have died. God knows how many are coming back limbless. Others with post-traumatic stress disorder. This is not making us safer. This is not within our interests. This is what he says to me. An Arab American. An American Arab. An American who happens to be Arab. I look back at him. I'm not some mainstream CNN producer. And 3 Iraqis have died since our conversation started. I'm not an American. I'm a human being. I don't write poems about Kevlar vests or USO tours. And don't get me wrong. I support the troops. The ones in Iraq, Palestine, Afghanistan, Northern Ireland, South Africa, and Birmingham. And not all their bullets fit in guns. They've written poetry and music and literature an oppressor could never dream of. I do. I feel bad that I can afford my new iPhone. But I've yet to hear you utter that more than 1 million Iraqis have been slaughtered in this war. That their $79 billion surplus can't even get them electricity or stability. That the surge has failed. Baghdad has been cleansed of Sunnis and more than 5 million have been made refugees. I'm sorry that you can't afford your cross-country road trip because gas costs too much money and the US dollar can't get you past Go and Monopoly. We wrap ourselves around 50 stars and lapel pins while civilians and occupied nations die because of our policy. If that makes me anti-American, would me rip me from my home and waterboard me in a Guantanamo prison? I'm not looking for the American dream or your silly notion of exceptionalism. You think because you love a country, it excuses jingoism. Your so-called rights and interests matter more than the countlessness of others. And you know what? I'm not going to call you a sellout or Arab Uncle Tom. I'm going to call you what you are, a shitty human being, one that chides a right, invokes civil movements, all while taking a step backwards. Yes, Iraq has cost us $1 trillion, but there's no currency to replace your thirst for hegemony. I'm not an American. I'm a human being. If that's so hard for you to stomach, maybe you should have a plane ticket with your frequent flyer miles and move the hell out of my country.
We have this weird party in the U.S. called the Tea Party. And there's a lot of crazy people who are like, the world is 6,000 years old and dinosaurs walked with man. And that hurricane happened last week because a gay person got married and a woman had an abortion. I'm like, what? What? Has anybody ever been experienced to the evangelical community? Hi, thank you so much for coming. They're a little intense over there. So, I'm going to do a poem about them afterwards because they like occupation, they like apartheid. Because essentially the reason why they support Israel is they think 2/3 are going to convert, 1/3 is going to be killed, and then there's going to be a second coming of the Messiah. I'm like, seriously? I missed that verse. So, I'm gonna read a poem now. Not that they're not all lovely poems. But I have this book. We sell it for an obnoxious amount online. I blame my publisher. We sell it for £17 online. But I want to make it available in the UK, so we're selling it 12 to general, and then £12 to general, and £10 for students, broke people. You can just be like, I want to pay 10. And it's actually 2-in-1 because, oh, look at what we got here. Boom, comes with a CD. So you're driving in your car, and you're at that red light, and they're like, wow, Amy's so angry. No, just Remi on the radio. And so we'll be doing a book signing and a hugging afterwards. And if you have any questions, comments, you can always hit me up on Facebook, Twitter, and all that other fun stuff, or email. My book is dedicated to my grandmother, my Tante Leonie. Both sides of my family are refugees from 1948. My mother's side's from Jaffa, my father's side's from Haifa. And it's going to be hard to read this poem with a bar going. But I thought it was important. And basically, there's a poem dedicated to her called Jaffa. And if you ever get a chance to talk to a refugee, and that refugee doesn't have to be Palestinian, it's a world of just so much beauty and heartbreak and eloquence. And I always remember my grandmother's stories. So as I grew up on Coca-Cola and McDonald's, when I came back to it afterward, I had my grandmother's stories. And unfortunately, she wasn't in the proper condition to answer all the questions that I had by the time I became really active. She was ill. And there are also 48 three-line poems in the book, split up into 4 different sections to signify 1948, which is the Nakba, the dispossession of the Palestinian people, each one to signify one of my displaced grandparents. So this is called Yalta. And then I'll read a couple of the 3-line poems. Thanks. Sit down now. Am I a weirdo for standing on the chair? What? Screw you guys. She no longer recognizes my face. Never will again, but can still smell her oranges. Feel the sun kiss her face as if on her balcony in Yalta, 61 years later. Described like the most magnificent villa, must have been 7 stories tall, spanned half the neighborhood, tree branches opened like arms. So trunks, coincident beauty. I visited the house with my brother. Israeli cab driver said he'd never heard of the street. Palestinian presence must have made his memory vivid. My grandmother was a painter, mostly landscapes. Now she can only describe them words like poetry, thoughts like scholars. No matter how much I read and write, I always feel like a student in the presence of refugees. My grandmother's stories came back like Haifa's waves. The outside world may never mention their names, but the roots of olive trees will never forget what happened. And I'm going to attempt to read a few of these. Does anybody remember the Lebanon War? There was an iconic image of little Israeli girls riding on missiles, and it was said with love, and those missiles were then used on the civilian population of Lebanon. Raise your hand if you remember that. Sweet, okay, there's 8 of you. So this is a poem for that, and then I'll read a few more, and then I'll close up with some what? I got 20 minutes. Boom! Aren't you excited? Go grab a burger. We're gonna be here for a long time. I'm a weirdo. Awesome. Missiles said, with love. I fall to where they hit. Charred limbs, stained tears, rotting corpses. No love in sight. You're awesome. People don't usually clap at the little 3-liners. I take back everything I said about Britain, except Balfour Declaration, the British Mandate, Tony's Larry, an asshole, and all of those things. Oh. This will be very helpful. Coming in useful, coming in useful. I do this all the time. Yeah, I think this is my 18th show in like 15 days in the UK. Yay, I still got like 6 more. I'm not tired. If I fall asleep on you, I don't know. I blame myself. He lifted up his shirt, showed me 2 bullets that pierced his shoulder, lifted up his pant leg, showed me where a tear gas canister shattered his kneecap, never touched a gun or picked up a rock. His loud voice, more powerful than any cannon. The soldier stroked his gun as he looked at the young girl, raped her with his eyes, occupied every part of her being. She said nothing, stared at the ground and kept walking. One more checkpoint until she's home. They bombed the 4th floor, said he didn't have a permit, said terrorists lived up there, said the height was obstructing their view, said they didn't like the wallpaper, said and said and said. They bombed the neighbor. The family was still inside. In Gaza, an Israeli soldier remains in prison. The world knows his name and the conditions to set him free. 7,700 Palestinians wallow in Israeli dungeons. The world cannot mention their names because they never bothered to learn them. And this last one. She closes her eyes, smells the sea salt, takes in a deep breath, and feels the wind of her arms as her father once did. For a split second, she imagines a return, where she was born, where she belongs. So I'm going to do however many more I can in the next 20 minutes, but whatever. This next poem was called Before the Machetes Are Raised, and it's actually weird. I'm doing a lot of like Martin and Malcolm themes. I think the next one too. But essentially in my country there's been the systematic dehumanization of the Arab and Muslim male post 9/11. Whereas you can go into Afghanistan tomorrow, kill 1,000 Afghan males, and it's like, well, we're brown, well, they're Afghan, they were probably insurgents, new insurgents, we're cousins of insurgents, they probably shouldn't have been at that wedding, they should have known better. And we've done this with the black Latino male prior and after 9/11, where, you know what, just another black guy on death row. Just another incident of Chandel not having any arms whatsoever on him, pinned down by police and gunned down like cattle. So this is called Before the Machetes Are Raised, and it goes out to this kind of systematic dehumanization of the male individual, as if their lives don't matter, as if their lives can just be tossed aside. And I have a mother, I have a sister, I have a cousin who just had the most beautiful baby girl in the world. But human life matters. Men, women, and children, human life matters. And just because it's happening over there doesn't mean that it's not important to us. Doesn't mean that a Nicaraguan mother's life or an Iraqi mother's life isn't as important as an American mother's life. So this is called Before the Machetes Are Raised. I'm not happy that they're gone, but I'm happy that I can walk. I'm so strong. I apologize for wearing t-shirts 2 sizes too small for me. I mean, while I'm not a fat child anymore, it stays inside. That's where all the gel hair comes from too. Hey now, kids. Put that on YouTube. Awkward. Oh, I always say, if you're anti-Zionist, you just need to buy 1 copy of this book. If you're Zionist, you should buy 2. I'm disgusted by terrorism. Backwards animals who have no value for human life, produce propaganda videos to disseminate their message, prey on the weakest in society, infect children, recruit fighters like expendable ants and their ideological struggle. You know who I'm talking about. Soldiers who drop bunker-busting bombs on mosques and universities, decry the Middle East, below authority cultures and dictatorial rule, think stripes and codes, rather than decency and humanity give them worth in this world. I've seen one too many Facebook invites by jingoistic kids I went to high school and grade school with. Couldn't wait to get in some trigger time, hunt down cowheads and hajis like venison. And when some Marines grenade launcher catapults 120 mini bombs per minute, takes out 17 houses and 14 schoolgirls, I'm supposed to feel bad that he can't see his wife and daughter on Christmas. Respect the service when he comes back to the States, a murderer who destroyed a country full of daughters and wives that he'll never see Eden. We're so quick to honor the troops, but don't dare mention the widows, the trembling father crying immersed in his wife's charred flesh, a fetus blown out of her stomach. The soldier said, kicking down the door was too risky. Worse than love for the 25-year-old Iraqi man whose car was riddled with American-made bullets, pink-faced and surprised look like grabbing for sky, falling at 110-story towers. As long as we don't affect our interests, we'll shout out Darfur, Rwanda, and the need for antiretrovirals. Look at people's aid packages who can't compete. Rather than ravage lands, perfecting paradigms of imperialism and propaganda. Worse, that right-wing Zionists trying to save the Congo, combating Leviathan and Angola, genocide in northern Uganda. Worse to humanity. Before the machetes are raised and proxy forces put into place, King, Mandela, and Gandhi aren't meant to be easy reference platitudes to make you feel better at night. Help you forget that uncomfortable blow Americans don't want to face. Will worship American idols, but have no value for human life. And yet, all I hear are 20-somethings telling me they just are into politics. I wonder what they'd say at their family's funeral. After they were blown up into 386 different pieces, I'm sure they wouldn't discuss things. Because Palestine, it isn't their thing. Because politics, it isn't their thing. While we reach out for freedom and justice, we are defined as political. To undermine our suffering, create notions of two sides and equal conflict, cover up our dispossession and burn down villages. We are political, so you can ignore us, delegitimize and forget us. But we're human beings gracing the window pane, reflecting stillborn images. We're voices, chiming choirs and temples. We're light that won't be forgotten. We're here, and we won't go away. We're the world shiver. It's cold out here, and whether you like it or not, we're coming inside. So, I'm going to end with these two, because I feel like it. How many people were here at the workshop today? Do people need to hear this poem line on the apartheid again? Yeah. You think so? Okay, fine. We're going to end with 3 then. Boom! Awesome. I have a lot of really soft material that just won't be able to happen here today. But I love that you're drinking your coffee. The next poem I'm going to do is called This Poem Will Not End Apartheid. And then I'm going to end with, then I'll do a funny one and then end obscenely angry. Why not? I am on the organizing committee for the U.S. campaign for the academic and cultural boycott of Israel. I think it's important that we take action. If you see complicity with your government, it is the Israeli military that is dropping the bombs in the white phosphorus. It is the cultural ministers that are whitewashing it with this beautiful idea that if we just have liberal democracy, we can forget about the apartheid wall, we can forget about the settlements, we can forget about dispossession, we can forget about patent inequality. We should just focus on just being happy and sitting on the beach. So this is called This Poem on Apartheid. I'm not going to preface it too much, but if you have any questions, you can ask me later, and I will help you. You can also do the Mars handshake. I know people do that too. That's kind of fun. Wish I had a long cord. It's a soft one. I call it a lullaby for Zionism. I'm just kidding. Move! Might check with that. This poem will not end apartheid. My words, no matter how beautiful, clever, or carefully strung together, will not end occupation, allow the refugees to return, or create equality within Israeli society. The status quo is a fantasy, telling us it's okay to sit on our hands, called political art propaganda, rather than those who politicize our lives, propagandists. Every American and Brit should ask themselves this question: why are bombs and white phosphorus getting dropped on open-air prisons with money that should be going to pay for your medical expenses? And dear academics and leftists, I appreciate your books on Israeli massacres, but you refuse to take the bullets out of IDF guns with your stance is the problem. It's not just the occupation or putting a better face on Zionism, because 750,000 Palestinians were displaced before those settlements were constructed, half of them before Israel was created. We don't need another book explaining the situation. We need a lesson plan to stop the next bomb from dropping. Silence is complicity. Over-intellectualization tells us to theorize on the power of art. While farmers are kicked off land, children are stolen on the way to school, people are caged and beaten and split from loved ones, bombed and broken and open-air prisons, bond paid for with our tax dollars. We are part of the problem. That is not theoretical. I don't want to hug a segregationist, wave you at a separate water fountain, or appeal to you from the back of the bus. A day will come, I swear to you all, when Zionist power and embarrassment deny involvement like those who profited off the Stephen Biko's, like this body of Bobby Sands' empty stomach. So yes, I'm going to boycott all Israeli comments and go to the root of the conflict, because settlements are just the branches of a Zionist program. Every 7 to 9 cultural institution and dialogue farce, from Summat to a hollow that's burned to aroma, SodaStream and Motorola, breaking the 2-year contract. Stacks up little to 63 years of continued ethnic cleansing. Finally, to all you artists, building bridges between apartheid and normalization, you serve an agenda which reframes colonialism as enlightened liberalism. Concerts, ballets, and rallies in Israel's Sun City. A haven and party stop for pinkwashers who callously ignore Palestinian LGBT groups fighting against all systems of oppression. Palestinian civil society has spoken. Don't cross this picket line or cash in that paycheck sign apartheid. Put down stolen beauty, cancel that gig, and join the rest of us on the right side of history.
This one's important because crazy people in my country that I did that. We have this thing called Christian Zionism, which I talked a little bit about before. I got a little loopy. But basically, I was having this 2-hour conversation with this guy, and I don't know if you've noticed, but I like to talk. After you all leave, I could probably talk to that empty cup of coffee for 2 hours. But I was having a conversation with this guy, and after 2 hours, he was like, "What are you?" What do you mean? What are you? Toys R Us kid? No. What are you? Are you Sunni or are you Shia? Now that's one of those like awkward racist questions, like I would headbutt you, but I'm a nonviolent activist, so it kind of hurt my street cred, so I got to write a poem about you instead called Religious Harmony. And I was like, oh, I'm not really religious. And he's like, yeah, but what are you? And I was like, well, I was raised Greek Orthodox. He's like, what the hell is that? And I was like, baby Jesus chilling in the manger, they got some camels, they got some sand, and they're walking, and there's an ore, they see the star, and there's a light. Fat man comes down your chimney tree, he steals your cookies, he eats your cookies, he drinks a little bit of milk. It's kind of awkward, you think he's like a thief or a burglar, but he's actually just leaving your presents, so you're like, that's kind of okay. And then he was like, oh, I get it. And it was one of those really racist, awkward I get it. It's like, you're one of the good ones. If I saw you, I wouldn't clutch my wallet and run to the other side of the street. So I wrote a poem about him called Religious Harmony. And then we're going to end up obscenely angry because I love to shatter stereotypes. I don't know. It's hot in here. Sweating. Don't put that on YouTube. Hi, I'm looking at you for the first time. Warning. They say I'm one of the good ones. You can't tell by my skin color, but it's inherent in my breath. Heart soft, temper mellow, enlightened from fingertips to welcoming smile. And yet, I don't have enough ink. Don't have enough minutes, years, or lifetimes to write down all their names written in red on the wall, slaughtered. If I hear one more jackass ask my religion and think that one or the other would shape and define my worldview, I'm gonna flood his people, kill his firstborn, burn some witches, and have them drink at a separate water fountain because I'm a real Christian, just like you. This Zionist guy says to me, my grandparents were just as oppressed by his grandparents by the Muslims in Palestine. Really? Last I checked, it was Zionist rifles held against temples and dispossessed Haifa and Jaffa. Urban and third-gang bombings and massacres that formed an ethnocentric state that didn't recognize Muslims or Christians as equals. Right-wing crazies like Ayan Hirsi Ali want to talk about Dindis, but conveniently forget Palestinian third-class status as the indigenous population. Not going to have some racist right-wing Sarah Palin, Michelle Bachmann, Rick Perry, house rep tell me what's wrong with all those Muslims. Maybe they'll start listening to them when they stop starving Jesus is poor, aborting black and Latino lives on death row, and oversetting homeless people on the way to their Whole Foods. Or their Tesco, or Marks and Spencer's, or some UK example. I don't know. I'm not done. I have a little more for them. And to all you liberal secularists, just because just because you don't call it religion doesn't mean radical capitalism hasn't destroyed this country. With your grimy bankers and bailouts, liberals didn't mind destroying a country when they thought they could do it on the cheap. And plant a Starbucks on every Iraqi street corner, then blame George Bush when shit hit the fan. Now, I'm PSA, a public servant's announcement, or a poem, but I was raised Christian and still can't see how that matters. Your Friday prayers walking to the subway in Brooklyn, visit every corner in Jerusalem, never knew religion by name, but had faith in my people. Know that xenophobia is in vogue, and I've never been that cool. Remember, I was a fat kid, I had one eyebrow, it was really awkward, Catholic school. Although, maybe this all emanates from a religiously enlightened worldview that I'm predisposed to based on my Christian roots. Then again, maybe it's more simple. Maybe those who monolithically castigate 1.4 billion people are recalcitrant idiots, the true image of what they think the other is, the actual ultra evil that's created its own axis in which it fiendishly rules without knowing. We're ending on this one because you're lovely people and you gotta hear other stuff too. I take a lot of issue with the American left. Then again, I also take issue with unicorns, and the American left is like a unicorn, it doesn't actually exist. We do have leftists, we do have awesome people, and the American left has a cousin, I call it the Israeli left. And again, you do have Israeli leftists, you have boycotting with it, yay! But this last poem is called a trifecta poem. Now, I've never gambled on racetracks, but what's nice about trifecta poems, this poem is, I get to knock Barack Obama, the Palestinian Authority, and Israel all in one poem. It's like, whoa, trifecta. And we live in this crazy world where we think Barack Obama was going to be change and hope. I'm like, really? The guy's campaign cost $300 million. He had $300 million worth of favors to pay back. He's attacked civil rights. He's attacked policy on the U.S.-Mexico border. He's kicked out 400,000 undocumented people this year. He's drone bombing 6 different nations. He added tens of thousands of troops to Afghanistan. And the bullshit behind it, excuse my language, little boy, the BS behind it is this idea that we live in top-down societies. We don't. We live in bottom-up societies. If you think that voting for one person is activism, it is not. They will steal whatever you have left blind and leave you bloody down the sidewalk. So the reality is that we have to be part of the process. What is nice about this festival is that it's a coming together. It's not just about Palestine or the environment or tax cuts or the gouging of your healthcare system. There are so many issues that we all should care about. Now, I'm not saying that you have to work on 100 different issues, but the way in which we invest our time should be intersecting and connecting and building with different communities. Because the fight against injustice is hard enough alone. What we need to do is band together and fight against it, against that uphill battle. And I swear to you, there will be small gains here, there'll be small gains there, there'll be small gains there. But collectively, it will create a storm in a way that can't be contended with. So, this is called Only as Equals. I'm not really a fan of Jim Crow, so I wouldn't really want to live under that system. What's going on? I got energy. I'm doing another performance in like 3 hours in Halifax. But you guys are way cooler than them. Just kidding if they see that. You guys are way cooler than them. Just kidding if you saw that. What? Okay. Oh, then we'll be doing a fun book signing hugging afterwards. Yay. 2 for Zionists, 1 for anti-Zionists. They make good, what do they make? Oh, good stocking stuffers, eat gifts, Hanukkah presents. You just have like a random atheist friend. I have a lot of those. You can get one of them too. Oh, like it. Some like good anarchist stuff in there too. Okay, good. Every time I think of 9/11, I see burning flesh stripping off the bones of Iraqi children in Fallujah. Now Gaza. I tend to memorialize the forgotten, the eclipsing collateral damage of unpunished crimes, and maybe it's because I'm a numbers guy. Because if I had $1 for every time an Iraqi died since 2003, I'd be a millionaire. And don't get me wrong, sometimes I don't know who to hate more. The governments in the West or the politicians in the East who sell their souls quicker than the oil they export. Strong men who use Palestine as a tool to line their pockets and don't give a nickel to their people. Quincy governments who stitch mouth shut for a check from Washington and APEC. How can you be their prototypical anti-Semite if you're signing peace accords to oppress your own people? And then Orientalists and idiots want to talk about how we can't have democracy in the Middle East because of what happened in Gaza. A Hamas boogeyman wrapped in democratic elections. Rahm Emanuel wants to educate me and my people about democracy democracy gone wrong? Why isn't he trying implementing one in Israel first, instead of bowing down to terrorists like his father in the Israeli state, signing up? Bowing down to terrorists like his father in the Israeli state. I've never actually lost a line on this poem before. It's kind of one of my staples. Okay. Rahm Emanuel wants to educate me and my people about democracy gone wrong. Why didn't you try implementing one in Israel first, instead of bowing down to terrorists like his father in the IDF, lauding a third-rate racist European society that's imploding quicker than its moral standing in the world? Enlightened like 1950s Afrikaners and slave traders just because a house is beautiful doesn't mean the bones you built it on have fully decomposed. The Israeli left is about as alive as Ariel Sharon. I'm sick and tired. I'm sick and tired of asking for permission to resist from antiquated leftists and progressives who care more about keeping it kosher than moving things forward. I put down my pen and waited this to resist with college kids and Palestinians. Boycott and divest, because honestly, who cares about preserving a living when governments are killing civilians? Complicity by silence and reserve units bombing Gaza. Your academics and scholars, theater groups and practitioners are part of the problem. And if logic doesn't fit into your long-term plan of rejecting my right to return, I'm sorry. Maybe one day you return to reality where my people have babies quicker than Zionists can concoct joining options. I'm not looking for your sympathy or your introspective confessions. Won't sit on my hands until they use oxygen like the people of Balana Rafa, vote for Barack Obama, and pretend that his 22 days of silence was golden, while emaciated children starve to death, surrounded by their parents' corpses. This can't be America the Beautiful. A criminal with a few positive attributes doesn't alleviate genocide. Bombing Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Iraq, it doesn't make you historic. It makes you as blind and bloodthirsty as the white men that came before you. Apathetic hipsters now excited about a president who broke history but not poverty, occupation, or corporate interests. I'd rather proudly walk through the graveyards of peace accords and failed dialogue sessions than keep seeing my people just as occupied or third-class citizens. We are the gavel that'll slam down like a verdict. I'm not waiting for Israel, America, the Supreme Court to approve it. We'll put down the Leviathan, Caterpillar, and your apartheid companies. We're taking back the right to return and keys to a country because we've never asked you to go back to Europe or sit in open-air prisons. I'm not asking for advice. I'm explaining the decision. You can stay here with us, but only as equals. It's not that you're Israeli. It's that you're wrong. That's why I fight for my people.